Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now, let's get into today's tale. You're a liability now, Nyla. The words slapped across the conference room. 7 executives in tailored suits watched me from across the polished table as I stared at the termination papers. My left hand, the mangled one, trembling inside its compression glove. 2 minutes earlier, I'd been called in for what they described as a recovery check-in. Instead, I got this. After careful consideration of your condition, we've determined that continued employment presents unacceptable operational risks. The man speaking, Harlan, the operations director, hadn't looked me in the eyes once. The overhead lights reflected off his bald head as he slid the packet toward me. My mouth dried up. The surgical scars beneath my glove throbbed in rhythm with my racing heart. "But I'm healing," I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. The doctor said 8 more weeks of therapy, and I could return to modified duties. A woman I'd never met before, sharp blazer, sharper eyes, leaned forward. "Our legal team has reviewed your case extensively. Your workers' compensation benefits will continue for the prescribed period, but your position has been eliminated." The room tilted slightly. 18 months of surgeries, 7 operations, countless nights crying through pain so intense it made me vomit, all while believing I had something to return to. I'm Nyla Voss, 28 years old, and until this moment, I was a line supervisor at one of the largest manufacturing facilities in the Northwest. Before I go any further, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you are watching from? I want to know. My story reached real people, because for so long I felt completely alone. And if you think what I've said so far is bad, wait until you hear what happened next. Please like and subscribe, because I'm sharing this so others know they're not powerless. The accident happened during a midnight shift. We were rushing a special order, something management had promised a client, despite our facility running beyond capacity. The conveyor system jammed. I reached in to clear it, something I'd done 100 times before. But this time, someone in the control room overrode the safety lockout. The belt lurched forward, catching my hand between metal rollers. I remember screaming, but not much else until I woke up in the emergency room with doctors telling me they'd try to save what they could of my hand. "Can you sign here, acknowledging receipt of your separation agreement?" Harlan was extending a pen toward my right hand, my good hand, while everyone watched. "You want me to sign right now?" I looked at the stack of papers. "Don't I get time to review these with someone?" "Of course," said the sharp-eyed woman, Tessa from legal, as she finally introduced herself. "You have 7 days to review and sign, but we'll need you to collect your personal items today. Security will escort you to your desk. Security. Like I was dangerous now." The guard, Tanner, had known me for 6 years. He stared at the floor as he walked me to my small office in the administrative wing. People peeked over cubicle walls as we passed. I held my head high. Even as my vision blurred with tears I refused to shed. "I'm sorry, Nyla," Tanner murmured when we reached my door. "This is wrong." "Do you have to watch me pack?" I asked. He hesitated. "I'm supposed to, but I need coffee. Might take me 15 minutes to get it." He walked away, giving me privacy I wasn't supposed to have. I sank into my chair and stared at the beige walls. For almost 7 years, I'd given everything to this company. I started on the production floor right out of college, with my industrial engineering degree. Working night shifts while my friends enjoyed their 20s. I'd earned every promotion. Before the accident, I was on track to become the youngest production manager in company history. Now, I was garbage, to be removed. I pulled a cardboard box from the supply closet and began emptying my desk. Family photos. A small plant my mother had given me when I got promoted. The ceramic mug my team had bought me last Christmas, before the accident, when I was still whole. Before I became the woman they awkwardly avoided in the hallway. The bottom drawer stuck, as it always did. I yanked it harder than necessary with my good hand, sending it crashing to the floor. Content scattering. Perfect, I muttered, kneeling to gather everything, despite the pain shooting through my healing wrist. That's when I saw the folder that had slid beneath my desk. Old manila, with faded handwriting I recognized immediately. My grandfather's handwriting. Granddad had worked for this same company decades ago. He'd been some kind of engineering consultant in the early days, before the current owners bought it. When he died 3 years ago, I'd brought some of his old work journals to my office, thinking they might contain useful institutional knowledge. I'd skimmed them once, then forgotten them in my bottom drawer. I opened the folder. Inside were his meticulous notes about the original facility construction, including something I'd missed before: a small envelope taped to the back cover. Inside was a carbon copy of a legal document dated 1982. The heading read, Mineral Rights Retention Agreement. My phone buzzed with a text from Tanner. They're asking where I am. Wrapping up soon, I replied. I quickly photographed the document with my phone, then slipped it into my bag instead of the box. Something in my chest told me this wasn't something to hand over. Just finishing, I texted back. After Tanner escorted me to my car, I sat in the parking lot, staring at the sprawling facility where I'd spent my entire adult life. The main production building had been built in the 1980s, on land that, according to my grandfather's document, contained something valuable underneath. I drove to the small apartment I could barely afford on workers' comp payments. The surgeons had done their best, but my left hand would never be the same. I couldn't make a complete fist, couldn't feel the tips of my fingertips, couldn't open jars or button shirts without pain rippling up my arm. That night, I spread my grandfather's papers across my kitchen table and read every word. The more I read, the faster my heart raced. Granddad had been smart, smarter than I'd realized. When the company wanted to expand onto a new parcel of land in 1982, he'd negotiated his severance package to include retention of mineral rights beneath the proposed facility. At the time, those rights were considered worthless, just a quirk of an old engineer who liked to own things outright. But Granddad had suspected something. His notes referenced soil samples and geological surveys that suggested rare earth minerals might be present, elements that weren't particularly valuable then, but that he believed would become crucial in the future. He was right. Those same minerals were now essential components in everything from smartphones to electric vehicles. The demand had skyrocketed over the past decade. And according to this legally binding document, my grandfather, and now I, as his sole heir, owned the rights to everything beneath the main production facility. I called an attorney the next morning. Not the kind that handles worker injuries. I needed someone who specialized in mineral rights. Using part of my modest savings, I secured a consultation with Maris, who examined my grandfather's document with increasing interest. If this is authentic, she said, tapping the paper, and if these minerals are actually present in the quantities your grandfather suspected, this could be extraordinarily valuable. How valuable? I asked. We'd need surveys to confirm. But based on current market prices for these elements, potentially millions. I nearly fell out of my chair. Millions. The question is whether the company knows about this agreement. Have they been extracting anything from beneath the facility? No, I said, but they're planning to. There's a major expansion project starting next month. They're demolishing the old main building to construct something bigger. Maris's eyes widened. Then they'll have to drill deep foundations. If they encounter these minerals, they'd have to pay you, I finished. Yes. And judging by this document, They'd need your permission even to disturb the deposits. For the first time since my accident, I felt something other than pain and despair. It wasn't exactly hope. It was colder. Harder than that. "What do we do next?" I asked. "We verify the document's authenticity, confirm your inheritance rights, and conduct discrete testing to determine what's actually down there, all without alerting the company." Over the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. To anyone watching, I was just another injured worker, struggling through physical, therapy, and job applications. But every spare moment went toward building my case. Maris connected me with a geologist who used public records and historical surveys to confirm my grandfather's suspicions without trespassing on company property. The results exceeded even his estimates. The rare earth elements were there, concentrated in a deposit directly beneath the main facility. "Current market value?" I asked during a meeting with Maris and the geologist. "Approximately $13 million, the geologist replied. "Maybe more depending on extraction costs." 13 million. The number blazed in my mind like a neon sign. Meanwhile, the company moved forward with their expansion plans. Local news covered their announcement of a state-of-the-art production facility that would revitalize the area's manufacturing sector. The CEO, Jalen, smiled for cameras, talking about progress and the future. My future, according to them, was being discarded, like the damaged parts we used to throw away on the production line. Their progress through former colleagues who still spoke to me. The timeline accelerated. Demolition would begin in just 10 days. They'd already started clearing out equipment. "We need to act now," Maris advised. "Once they break ground, things get complicated." "I want a meeting," I said, "with Jalen and the board, and I want it to happen in that building." "They'll refuse. Tell them I'm considering legal action regarding my termination in the accident. Tell them I want to settle quietly. They'll agree to meet just to shut me up." The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. I spent hours preparing, rehearsing what I would say, how I would say it. I chose my outfit carefully, professional but not flashy. I didn't want to telegraph anything. Maris would accompany me, but we agreed she would remain silent unless legal questions arose. This confrontation needed to be mine. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I stood before my bathroom mirror, removing my compression glove to look at my scarred hand. The twisted fingers, the shiny red surgical scars, the constant reminder of how disposable I was to them. "Tomorrow," I whispered to my reflection. "Everything changes." I arrived at the facility 15 minutes early. Tanner met me at the security desk, surprise evident on his face. "They didn't tell me it was you coming in," he said, processing my visitor badge. "Would you have worn your good uniform if you'd known?" I attempted a joke. He didn't smile. "They've been clearing out the executive floor all week for the demolition. The conference room is about the only place still intact." The familiar walk through the facility felt surreal. Empty spaces where machinery had been. Walls marked for demolition. The ghosts of my former life echoed in every corner. Tessa met us at the elevator. "Miss Voss," she said with practiced neutrality. "The others are waiting upstairs." In the conference room sat Jalen, Harlan, and 2 board members I recognized from company photos. Their expressions ranged from annoyed to suspicious. "Nyla," Dalman began without standing. "I understand you wanted to discuss your separation package. While we sympathize with your situation, our decision is final." I placed my bag on the table but remained standing. "Actually, I'm here about your expansion project." Confusion flickered across his face. "Our what?" "The demolition scheduled to begin next week. The new facility you're planning to build." Harlan leaned forward. "What could that possibly have to do with you?" I glanced at Maris, who gave me a subtle nod. "Before we continue," I said, "I'd like to know if you're recording this meeting." "We are not," Tessa replied, clearly irritated by the question. "Good, Then I'll record it for my protection. I placed my phone on the table and started the recording app. Now wait, Harlan began. It's perfectly legal to record a conversation I'm part of, I interrupted. Unless you have something to hide. The room tensed. I could feel their collective annoyance hardening into something sharper. You have 5 minutes, Daman said. I reached into my bag and removed the folder. My hands, both the good and the damaged, were steady now. Do any of you know who Alrik Voss was? Blank stares met my question. He was my grandfather. He worked as an engineering consultant for this company from 1977 to 1982. He helped design the foundation for this very building. Ms. Voss, Tessa interjected, is there a point to this history lesson? When my grandfather left the company, he negotiated an unusual severance package. I opened the folder and slid the now authenticated document across the table. He retained all mineral rights to the land beneath this facility. Jalen didn't even glance at the paper. That's impossible. The company owns this property outright. You own the surface rights, but everything beneath, specifically from 20 FT below grade down, belongs to the estate of Alrik Voss, which, as his sole heir, means me. Now he looked at the document, picking it up with manicured fingers. His expression didn't change, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. This is some kind of joke, Harlan said, reaching for the paper. Or a forgery. It's been authenticated, Maris spoke for the first time. We have the original in safekeeping, filed with the county recorder's office last week. It's legitimate. Even if this were real, Tessa said, studying the document Harlan handed her. Mineral rights are only valuable if there's something worth extracting. That's when I placed the geological survey on the table. Neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, all rare earth elements essential for modern technology, all present in significant quantities, approximately 40 FT beneath where we're sitting right now. Current market value, approximately $13 million. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. I could almost see the calculations running behind their eyes. Your expansion project, I continued, will require deep excavation for the new foundation. According to this agreement, you cannot disturb these minerals without my express permission, which would involve a new contract and appropriate compensation. Jalen's face had lost its practiced smoothness. This is extortion. No, I replied calmly. This is business. The same business sense that told you an injured worker was too costly to keep around. We'll challenge this in court, Tessa said. But I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. You can try, but construction delays while litigation proceeds would cost you millions in lost production, not to mention the publicity when people learn you fired the injured granddaughter of the man whose minerals you're trying to take. Silence stretched across the room. I remained standing, looking down at the people who had discarded me without a second thought. What do you want? Daman finally asked, his voice tight. I smiled for the first time since entering the room. Now we can begin negotiating. What do I want? I repeated Jalen's question, letting it hang in the air. For 18 months, I'd wanted only one thing: to heal enough to return to my job. Now I stood before them with something they desperately needed, and the reversal of power made my chest tighten with an emotion I couldn't quite name. First, I want an acknowledgement that the safety protocols that failed the night of my accident were inadequate. Absolutely not, Tessa cut in. That's an admission of liability. We can't. Jalen raised his hand to silence her. Continue. Second, I want compensation for my injuries beyond the workers' comp minimum, enough to cover my ongoing therapy and the career opportunities I've lost. I watched their faces carefully. Jalen's expression remained controlled, but I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, weighing $13 million against whatever it would cost to make me go away. And third, I want a public apology for how I was treated after my injury. Not some carefully worded press release, but a real acknowledgement of how this company discards injured workers. Jake scoffed. This is ridiculous. We don't even know if this mineral claim is legitimate. You're welcome to contest it, I replied, but your construction permits are already filed. Your investors are expecting the new facility to break ground next week. How will they react when you tell them the project is delayed indefinitely while you fight a legal battle against a former employee with a valid mineral rights claim? The room went silent again. I remained standing, my damaged hand resting on the table beside the documents that had transformed me from victim to adversary. We'll need time to consider our options, Jalen finally said. You have until Monday, I replied. After that, I file an injunction against your construction project. As Maris and I walked toward the elevator, Tessa hurried after us. Nyla, wait. Her voice had lost its edge. Perhaps we can discuss this more constructively. Monday, I repeated, without turning around. In the car, Maris let out a long breath. You were magnificent in there. I was terrified, I admitted. They couldn't tell. She squeezed my shoulder. But you should prepare yourself. They won't surrender easily. Companies like this have resources. She was right. That evening, someone followed me home from the grocery store. A black SUV that stayed 3 cars behind until I pulled into my apartment complex. I caught only a glimpse of the driver, a man in sunglasses despite the setting sun. The next morning, my mother called in a panic. Someone from your company contacted me, asking strange questions about your grandfather's estate. How did they get my number? The intimidation escalated over the weekend. My email was flooded with messages from unknown senders. My phone rang constantly with unlisted numbers. Sunday night, I found a note on my windshield. Take the first offer. By Monday morning, I was running on caffeine and anxiety. Maris arrived at my apartment early, messaging a digital security expert named Beck, who swept for surveillance devices and secured my phone and laptop. They're desperate, Beck explained as he worked. That's good. It means they know you have them cornered. At 10 a.m., Damon's assistant called to schedule a meeting for that afternoon. Not at the facility this time, but at their corporate headquarters downtown. Neutral ground, Maris observed. They're trying to regain control of the narrative. Will it just be Jalen? I asked. No, they mentioned their lead counsel will be present, someone named Silas. I froze. Everyone in the company knew Silas. He wasn't just their attorney. He was the fixer who made problems disappear. Cold, methodical, ruthless. If they were messaging him in, they weren't planning to negotiate. They were planning to destroy me. We need backup, I told Maris. Can you get someone else from your firm to join us? Or hours later, we sat in a gleaming conference room with views of the city skyline. The contrast to my old workplace was stark. Everything here screamed money and power. Dominating one wall was the company logo. Its blue and silver colors reflected in the glass table where we waited. The door opened and they filed in. Jalen, Tessa, 2 board members, and finally Silas. Tall, silver-haired, with eyes that assessed everything like he was cataloging weaknesses. He didn't offer to shake hands. Moss, he began without preamble. I've reviewed your claim regarding the mineral rights beneath our production facility. His voice was surprisingly soft, almost gentle, which somehow made him more intimidating. While the document appears authentic, there are several problems with your position. He opened a leather portfolio. First, the land parcel described in this agmarissement was substantially modified during rezoning in 1997. Second, mineral rights in our state revert to the surface owner if not actively exercised within 20 years. Glanced at Maris, whose expression remained neutral, even as my stomach dropped. And third, Silas continued, sliding a document across the table. Your grandfather's estate was probated without this asset being declared. That creates significant questions about your standing to assert these rights. Now, for a moment, The confidence I'd built crumbled. They'd done their research, thoroughly, finding legal angles I hadn't considered. "We're prepared to be generous despite these issues," Jalen said, leaning forward. "We'll offer you a consulting contract, $150,000 annually for 2 years, to assist with the transition to the new facility. In exchange, you'll sign a comprehensive release of all claims, including these purported mineral rights." It was insulting. $300,000 for $13 million in minerals. Before I could respond, the door opened again. A tall woman with cropped gray hair entered, carrying a slim briefcase. "Sorry I'm late," she said, taking a seat beside Maris. "Traffic was dreadful." "And you are?" Silas asked, irritation flickering across his face. "Corin Mason, mineral rights specialist." She glanced at me. "Miss Voss asked me to join once she learned you'd be attending, Mr. Silas." The energy in the room shifted. I hadn't known who Maris was messaging, but clearly, Silas recognized the name. His posture stiffened, almost imperceptibly. "Now," Corin continued, opening her briefcase. "Regarding your points about rezoning and dormant mineral rights, both excellent arguments if they applied here, but they don't." She produced a map. "The rezoning in 1997 modified property lines, but explicitly maintained all existing mineral rights agmarisments. Page 42 of the county resolution." She handed copies to everyone at the table. "And our state's Dormcancy statute exempts rare earth minerals, which weren't commercially viable until recently. The legislature recognized that these resources might gain value in the future and protected long-term rights holders." Silas's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened on his pen. "As for the probate issue, that's simply incorrect. The mineral rights were properly listed in Schedule B of Alric Voss's estate inventory. Perhaps you were looking at the preliminary filing rather than the final amended documents." Corin slid another paper across the table. "This was recorded 8 years ago." I watched the company representatives exchange glances. They hadn't expected this level of preparation. "Even if Ms. Voss's claim is valid," Tessa interjected, "we can still proceed with construction if we don't extract the minerals." "Technically, yes," Corin replied. "But your building plans include underground parking and storage facilities that would disturb the mineral deposits. That would constitute extraction under the law." "We could modify the plans," Jalen suggested. "You could," I said, finding my voice again. "But your investors were promised a state-of-the-art facility. Eliminating the underground components would reduce the building's footprint by almost 40%. Would they accept that?" Silence fell over the room. I realized that for the first time since my accident, these people were seeing me. Really seeing me, not as a broken body to be discarded, but as an adversary who had outmaneuvered them. "What do you actually want?" Silas finally asked. His soft voice hardened with frustration. I looked directly at Jalen. "I want what those minerals are worth. $13 million ours." "Impossible," he snapped. "Then I want a percentage of your new facility's profits in perpetuity. 10%. Also impossible." "Then we remain at an impasse," I said, gathering my papers. "I'll proceed with the injunction tomorrow morning." "Wait." It was one of the board members, an older woman named Nara, who had remained silent until now. Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly. All eyes turned to her. Miss Voss was a valuable employee before her injury. We invested in her training, her education, and we failed her when the accident happened. She looked at me with something resembling genuine regret. "What if we offered partnership rather than opposition?" "What kind of partnership?" Maris asked cautiously. "A joint venture, to extract the minerals during construction. We have the equipment, the permits, the expertise. Ms. Voss has the rights. We split the proceeds, 60-40 in her favor." The room erupted in objections from both sides. Silas leaned toward Jalen, whispering urgently, Reyes and Corin conferred with me. "It's not $13 million up front," Corin murmured. "But it could be more, over time if the deposits are as rich as we believe. Plus you'd have ongoing involvement with the company, on your terms this time," Maris added. I considered it, watching Jalen's face as he argued with Nara. He didn't want this deal. He wanted me gone. Silenced. Defeated. That realization made my decision easy. "I accept the joint venture," I announced, interrupting the various conversations. "With conditions." The room quieted. "First, I want a formal acknowledgement of the safety failures that led to my injury." Jalen started to object, but Nara silenced him with a look. "Second, I want a company-wide review and overhaul of worker safety protocols, with quarterly public reporting." Silas frowned but made a note. "And third, I want a position on the board's safety committee, with full voting rights." This caused the biggest stir yet. Board positions were jealously guarded, passed among an elite network of executives and investors. "Impossible," Jalen said again, but with less conviction. "Actually," Nara replied, "we've been under pressure from shareholders to add someone with direct production experience to that committee. Ms. Voss would qualify." The negotiation continued for the Maris more hours. By the end, my voice was raw, my damaged hand throbbing, but the framework of an ag Marisment had emerged, one that would transform not just my life, but potentially the lives of every worker at the company. As we prepared to leave, Jalen approached me privately. "You've won this round," he said quietly. "But remember who you're dealing with." I looked at him steadily. "I remember exactly who I'm dealing with. That's why I recorded everything you just said." His eyes widened slightly. "I'm not the same person you discarded, Jalen. I don't scare easily anymore." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The joint venture Ag Marisment was finalized. Construction began on the new facility, with specialized equipment to extract the rare earth minerals during excavation. Initial samples confirmed what the surveys had suggested. The deposits were rich and extensive. My first check arrived 30 days later, $2 million as an advance against future proceeds. I paid off my medical debts and bought a house with accessibility features for the days when my hand hurt too badly, to manage standard fixtures. But money wasn't the victory that mattered most. At the first safety committee meeting, I presented a comprehensive analysis of accident patterns at the facility. Information I'd gathered during my years as supervisor, but that had been ignored by management. The board listened. Changes were implemented. Training protocols were overhauled. Months later, workplace injuries had decreased by 62%. A year after our confrontation in the conference room, I sat across from Jalen again. This time, as a respected board committee member, reviewing the success of the joint venture. The mineral extraction had yielded even more than projected, $17 million in the first phase alone. "The shareholders are pleased," he said stiffly. "The workers are safer," I replied. "That matters more." He didn't ag Maris. Of course, men like Jalen never truly changed, but he'd been forced to adapt to a new reality, one where injured workers weren't simply discarded, where safety wasn't just a slogan on a break room poster. My hand still aches in cold weather. I still can't make a complete fist or feel my fingertips. Some injuries never fully heal. But sitting here now, telling you this story, I want you to understand something. The most dangerous moment in my life wasn't when that conveyor belt crushed my hand. It was when I believed I was powerless, when I accepted their definition of my worth. The true revenge wasn't the money, although that helped. It wasn't watching Jalen squirm in board meetings, though I won't pretend that isn't satisfying. The real revenge was transforming from someone who could be discarded into someone who couldn't be ignored, from a victim into an advocate, from powerless to powerful. Powerful. If you're watching this and feeling trapped, or broken, or discarded, know that your story isn't over. The people who underestimate you are making the most expensive mistake of their lives. Your value isn't determined by what you can do for others. It's inherent, unchangeable, and completely yours. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe. Each comment you leave helps this message reach someone else who might need to hear that they're not alone, that they have power they haven't discovered yet. Share where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to fight back against a system that tried to discard you, remember? Sometimes the most devastating response to those who hurt you isn't seeking vengeance. It's succeeding so thoroughly that they're forced to witness your rise. The best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better.